Geophysical mapping and its applications. The primary objective of geophysical mapping is to help identify and trace undercover the various geological formations and structures in an area and possibly estimate their depth persistence. In effect, it amounts to adding the all-important third dimension to the conventional geological mapping of the surface rocks and indirectly aiding exploration. Geophysical mapping of sedimentary basins by regional gravity and magnetic surveys is a familiar example in the search for hydrocarbons, coal and groundwater. So is the case of mapping bedrock topography by resistivity or refraction seismic survey for a dam site investigation. However, the advent of airborne and satellite geophysics with capabilities of generating voluminous data over very large areas in a relatively short time has ushered in the concept of geophysical mapping as an endeavor, as fundamental as geological mapping, whether the goal is basic geology or economic targets. This video explains a wide range of applications of geophysical mapping, employing different geophysical techniques. Let us discuss depth of mapping. In contrast to satellite imagery that brings out mainly the surface features of the Earth, geophysical mapping extends to various depths depending on the type of method employed. For example, radiometric data essentially reflect the near-surface variations, due to its limited penetration of a few tens of centimeters. In electromagnetic methods, the depth of penetration, which rarely exceeds 200 meters, depends in a complex way on various factors such as the type of the equipment deployed, frequency of the source, nature of the host rock and overburden. Although magnetic and gravity methods, being potential field methods, are theoretically not supposed to have any depth control. Station spacing and area of coverage do influence the depth of investigation. Thus, regional surveys with large station intervals tend to bring out deeper bodies, as compared to detailed surveys with close station spacings, which predominantly refer to shallow features. Between gravity and magnetics, while the maximum depth of detectability in magnetics is limited by the Curie point, isotherm lying roughly around 20 km depth, the detectability in gravity goes down to much greater depths. With such varying depths of investigation, the corroboration between a geophysical map and a traditional geological map may be quite varied. There is a fundamental difference between a geophysical map and a traditional geological map. A geophysical map is essentially parametric in nature and content and may not directly reflect the surface geology. Just as it shows only lateral variations in density in a gravity map, it only shows lateral variations in magnetization, electrical conductivity or natural radioactivity in corresponding maps. On the other hand, geological classification of rocks is based on their bulk mineralogy comprising mostly of complex silicates. As such, when geophysical surveys are aimed primarily at mapping the near-surface geology undercover, as distinct from mapping of features at various depths, an exact one-to-one corroboration between these two maps is not to be expected as a rule. Reasonably good corroboration may be anticipated between radiometric maps and surface geology. Even here, however, an extensive granite or gneissic formation mapped geologically as a single unit may turn out to be actually made up of different units in terms of the distribution of K40. Thus, geophysical and geological maps should be considered complementary in nature, and the absence of correlation between them should in fact lead to new insights on the probable genesis and geological history of the various formations in an area. Methodology and scale. The entire ensemble of available geophysical methods and techniques find application in mapping. The precise methodology would naturally depend on the scale and objectives of the survey. When more than one method is of scale, the surveys may range from regional mapping of several thousand applicable. Speed and cost of the survey will decide the methodology. In terms square kilometers to very detailed mapping of the bedrock at a proposed dam site over say a square kilometer of area. Although any convenient scale can be used for the preparation of a map, the basic requirement is that the density the data should be commensurate with the scale opted. The two map scales that are commonly used for mapping are 1:250,000 and 1:50,000 for compatibility with the available topographic maps. Regional gravity and high-level aeromagnetic maps are generally prepared on 1:250,000 scale. The output maps of multi-sensor low-level airborne surveys employing magnetic, electromagnetic, and radiometric methods are mostly brought out on 1:50,000 scale. Geophysical maps on larger scales are also prepared from the data obtained by systematic grid-type surveys, for use as overlays with geological maps. Formation mapping. Almost every geological formation with its compositional peculiarities and evolutionary history tends to develop its own geophysical identity in terms of some diagnostic physical property, or the other with respect to the adjoining rocks. Granting this, the level and character of its geophysical response should enable us to map any two adjacent formations, and of course their contact. The three main rock types comprising igneous, sedimentary and metamorphic generally exhibit different physical properties, although overlaps are not uncommon, and are thus distinguishable by one or the other of geophysical methods. The geophysical methodology applicable to identify some of the geological formations are discussed here. Igneous rocks. As a group, igneous rocks are hard and compact. In dimension, they vary from granites of batholithic dimensions and vast effusive flood basalts to dikes, sills to small quartz and pegmatite veins. Acid igneous rocks like granites have dominant quartzofelspathic minerals, compared to their basic and ultrabasic counterparts, which contain higher amounts of ferromagnesian minerals. As such, acid igneous rocks exhibit lower density compared to basic rocks. They also exhibit lower magnetization, higher resistivity and higher radioactivity than basic igneous rocks. Therefore, acid and basic igneous rocks can be easily mapped by gravity, magnetic, resistivity, and radiometric methods. Ultrabasic rocks such as pyroxenites and peridotites too can be traced by gravity, magnetic, and even radiometric methods because of their higher density, magnetization and lower radioactivity. Sedimentary rocks. It is very difficult to generalize the physical properties of sedimentary rocks because of many factors. Their density is clearly lower than igneous and metamorphic rocks, except in the case of limestones and shales, whose densities may reach up to 2.7 and 3.2 respectively. Overlapping with igneous and metamorphic rocks. Again, almost all sedimentary rocks, except those which are ferruginous, are weakly magnetic. So most sedimentary formations can be mapped by gravity and magnetic methods. The resistivity of sandstones can be wide-ranging depending on porosity and conductivity of the pore fluid. While dry sands exhibit high resistivities of a few thousand ohm-meter, saturated sands and poorly saturated sandstones may have low overlapping resistivities. Quartzites are typically high in resistivity and generally arenaceous rocks are more resistive than their argillaceous counterparts. The radioactivity of many sedimentary rocks is low, but clays and shales exhibit high radioactivity. Therefore, resistivity and ground gamma ray spectrometer surveys can distinguish between these formations. Metamorphic rocks. Metamorphic rocks also exhibit large variations in their physical properties depending on the degree of metamorphism. Schists may attain a density of 2.9 gram per cc, depending on the presence of chlorite and other minerals. That is why greenstone belts often show up as linear gravity highs. Even the magnetic signatures are very clear over them in the form of clusters. But in the case of charnockets, the response may be varied depending on whether they are acidic, basic or of intermediate composition. While sharp magnetic anomalies may occur over basic charnockets, the magnetic response may be feeble over others. Schists, amphibolites, pyroxenites, tend to show lower resistivity than gneisses, partly due to electronic conduction through the ferromagnesian mineral grains, and partly due to the presence of moisture. They also manifest as areas of low radioactivity in airborne spectrometric maps. A combination of gravity, magnetic and resistivity or M methods may be more effective in mapping the metamorphic rocks than any one method. What is structural mapping? Structural mapping involves locating and tracing features like lineaments, faults, folds, shear zones, buried ridges, paleocanals, hosts, and grabens, which are of great interest not only in exploration for Earth resources, but also in many other engineering and environmental problems. Lineaments. With the conceptual approach in mineral exploration gaining momentum in recent years, lineaments have acquired considerable importance. A lineament is defined as a mappable, simple or composite linear feature of a surface, whose parts are aligned in rectilinear or slightly curvilinear relationship and which differs distinctly from the patterns of adjacent features, and presumably reflects a subsurface phenomenon. Depending on their nature, these lineaments may find expression in one or more data sets. The importance of these lineaments is such that very often they represent weak zones in the Earth, corresponding to contacts, fractures, faults, shear zones, which are important for most exploration programs, including groundwater. By the same argument, areas of high lineament density are not favorable for dam sites and other engineering structures. While abrupt change in the continuity of formations is used as a criterion for identifying a geological lineament from air photos or imagery, abrupt change in the trend of geophysical profiles, or contours due to lateral change in density, magnetization, conductivity is an indication of a geophysical lineament. Elaborating on what is stated earlier, there is an important difference between the geological lineaments as inferred from photogeology, or satellite imagery on the one hand, and lineaments inferred from geophysical maps on the other. While the former may often represent entirely superficial features as viewed as seen from an aircraft or satellite, the geophysical lineaments invariably reflect features that extend in depth. Indeed, it is not uncommon to find a swarm of lineaments in aerial and satellite photos, most of which do not find any corroboration in geophysical maps. And those few that find corroboration do not necessarily coincide on the ground with the corresponding geophysical lineaments. It is necessary to mention here that gravity lineaments drawn along the axes of crowding of contours follow the tectonic contacts, while those drawn joining the maxima, or minima, follow ridges and valleys. If there is a fault appearing on the surface and extending into depth, the lineament inferred from the imagery, and the one based on gravity may not coincide exactly unless the fault plane is vertical. The inferred geophysical lineaments will shift towards the down deep side of the fault plane, with respect to geological lineament more for small angles of deep. If the fault is not exposed on the surface, it may not even show up in the imagery. Faults. A fault is a common structural feature that usually produces a marked geophysical response, as a result of two different formations with contrasting physical properties coming into sharp contact with each other. Faults can be mapped almost by any method like gravity, magnetic, resistivity, seismic, or radiometrics. Depending on the formations involved in the physical property contrast, any of these methods can be selected. The greater the contrast, and larger the throw across the fault, the stronger will be the geophysical response. Certain regional features like hosts and grabens involving vertical block movements along major faults are more or less routinely mappable by the gravity method in particular. While a gravity high is obtained over a host, a graben yields a gravity low is to be expected. In either case, the faulted margins coincide with the steepest flanks of the anomalies. A boundary fault between gneisses and a sedimentary basin will strongly reflect in gravity, as also in magnetics, while intra-basinal faults may exhibit weaker response due to decreased contrast. As well as throw, quantitative estimate of the throw may be obtained by gravity and magnetic methods also, but it is more reliably obtained by methods that have direct control on depth like seismic refraction and electrical resistivity. The horizontal gradient of gravity brings out sharper responses over faults than gravity itself. Microfaults that occur in mining areas may or may not be detectable by surface geophysical surveys, but can be recognized either from borehole geophysical logs or by high-resolution reflection seismic surveys. Shear zones and joints. A shear zone, as its name implies, is not just a sharp contact like a fault, but has some width, however big or small. Shear zones are generally filled with fine material like clays and moisture. These are easily mapped by resistivity or electromagnetic surveys. Although gravity and magnetic methods also may respond to shear zones, one cannot make out about the degree of conductivity of the shear zone. Shear zones and joints, when they are too narrow, require closer observations of even say 1 meter apart, for detection. Folds. Mapping of folds is a more complex exercise, because often 2 or 3 different formations of different physical properties will be involved in folding. As such, the overall response depends on whether it is an anticline or a syncline and whether the formations in the core of the fold enhance or reduce the anomaly. In any case, the axis of a fold can be mapped by one method or the other. If it is a plunging fold, the anomaly will tend to decrease towards the plunge. Folded structures can be easily appreciated from airborne magnetic and radiometric maps. Bedrock and basement. The term bedrock is used by civil engineers for any hard and compact formation that can serve as a strong foundation for erecting engineering structures. Thus, bedrock could be a crystalline basement in some areas or hard and compact sandstone or even limestone in others. The bedrock is usually mapped without much difficulty by resistivity or seismic refraction surveys. If the soil cover is small, say not more than 10 to 20 meter, a single channel refraction survey will suffice. Where the surface conditions are unfavorable for resistivity work due to sandy or glacial cover, M soundings would be more appropriate. It is to be noted that with the advances in reflection seismics and ground-penetrating radar, these methods are in great use for shallow bedrock mapping. Further, where there is a velocity inversion in the subsurface layers, these methods are to be preferred to refraction seismics. The crystalline basement refers generally to a granite or gneissic rock, which may be horizontal, undulating or faulted, resulting in varying thickness of the overlying formations. Depending on the area, the basement depth may be a few meters to hundreds or thousands of meters. The basement rocks are always hard and compact compared to the overlying formations and exhibit a higher density, magnetization, electrical resistivity as well as seismic velocity. Basement can be mapped by gravity or magnetic methods. However, resistivity and in particular refraction seismic soundings will yield reliable depths. Buried channels. As buried channels are scoured in the underlying rock, the problem necessarily reduces to one of mapping the concealed topography of the bedrock. While these channels create problems in civil engineering the desired targets in exploration for groundwater. Buried channels may be mapped by gravity, magnetic, resistivity and seismic methods because the sediments in the channel will have contrasting physical properties with respect to the surrounding rock in all the cases. Cavities and voids. When the bedrock happens to be limestone, cavities in them may create foundation and leakage problems in civil engineering, although they may be good reservoirs of groundwater. Similarly, cavities or voids in coal mines create problems in mining as well as in mine safety. These cavities, with or without water, are detectable by resistivity and gravity methods provided their size is comparable to the depth of burial. Detection of cavities is also possible by shallow hole temperature surveys. Although features like cavities can be mapped by geophysical tomography, it becomes an expensive option.